Everybody, Bryson Kaler here. I'm the CTO of Equifax, and it is a pleasure to be with you this afternoon here at the Georgia Technology Summit. You know, this summit is a really great opportunity for us to come together and learn, share, and network as we are all on a journey for ourselves and our companies to constantly improve. You know, at Equifax, we've been on a transformation journey for the last several years, going through our own reinvention of who we are, on a mission to help people live their financial best. We've reinvented our technology, leveraging full cloud-native thinking and capabilities, shutting down our old and moving to the new, but also reinventing our culture and our people along the way. You know, bringing forward a product mindset in everything we do. That product mindset is so critical to how we think about innovation going forward. And it has been enabled by us constantly rethinking who we are and pushing ourselves to improve. Now, that product mindset helped us innovate and launch a record number of new products into the market over the last year. We also lowered our time to market by 30%. These types of amazing outcomes are driven by an amazing team. You know, we have an amazing team at Equifax, and we're constantly working together to push ourselves and learn and improve. Now, this afternoon, Robyn Benincasa, who is our keynote speaker, is going to share a little bit of her own learnings around how she has worked with her team to improve. You know, for the last 20 years, she and her teammates have been competing all over in the most unique and compelling classroom that the planet Earth has to offer. Whether it's the jungles of Borneo, the Himalayan peaks of Tibet, the rivers of Fiji, the rainforests of Ecuador, these are the classrooms that are extreme environments. And when you put your team in an extreme environment, you see the good, you see the bad, and you sometimes see the ugly, but you learn from them along the way. So what Robyn's going to share with us is, what has she learned? How did they work? What was the good, the bad, and the ugly of putting her team in these extreme environments? And how can we all take those back to our own extreme environments and learn and improve? So very excited, cannot wait to hear Robyn's story. Robyn, over to you.
The competitors here range from professional triathletes to lawyers to doctors and many teachers. But there's only one adventure racer who happens to be a female firefighter. Robyn Benincasa has started and finished this race 3 times before.
Ironman taught me how to be hard, how to be just mentally hard and to suffer. And I took that and brought it to adventure racing.
They have traveled here from every corner of the world. For 10 non-stop days and nights, they must hike, mountain climb, paddle, ride, and race through some of the most captivating yet dangerous terrain in one of the last great wilderness areas on Earth. This is the world's toughest adventure race.
Hey, tech superheroes of the Georgia Technology Summit. Are you guys ready for an awesome adventure? All right, let's do this thing. If there is one thing that everyone in this Georgia Tech ecosystem knows right now, dealing with the crazy pace of change in your world, from continuing to deal with ongoing challenges and changes, like, of course, the pace of change in technology and changes in the economy and markets and geopolitical and social challenges and changes, and the quest to find and retain great talent for your team and grow your business, and the constant upgrades to your customers' wants, needs, and expectations. And then you layer on top of that a pandemic last year, changing the way that we work and live and connect to other human beings, and really challenging all of us to find creative ways to support and provide value to our customers and our families as we all paddle through this crazy whitewater. But really, for being honest, since the day that you decided to be a tech superstar for a living, you probably never really had the same day twice. The only thing it feels like we know for sure right now is that change is the only thing that's going to stay the same in our lives, right? It's really how we respond to change that dictates our long-term success. So how do we, as leaders, build and lead the kind of teams that adapt, overcome, and win as one in the face of times of incredible challenge and change? Well, I want to share all this inspiring goodness with you today in the most fun way that I can, and that's using some examples and stories from my super silly, ludicrous sport of adventure racing. Now, I know most of you never heard of adventure racing, and if you think you've heard of it, you might be thinking of The Amazing Race, or you actually may have just watched Eco Challenge on Amazon. But I'll give you the scoop. It's a sport that was invented by a crazy Frenchman, and it involves small teams of men and women. You have to have one man and one woman on each 5-person team, so mixed gender teams, and the race director will ask you to meet them in the most remote place they can find on Earth. And they hand each team a set of maps and road rules. And the next morning, they say, ready, set, go. We'll see you guys in 600 to 1,000 miles. Whichever team gets there first wins. And it's all non-motorized transportation, like kayaking, mountain biking, whitewater rafting, mountaineering, and the clock never stops. So if you sleep and when you sleep is all part of your team's strategy. So the winning teams will get like an hour and a half of sleep every 24 hours and be racing the rest of the time. But as if the physical part isn't hard enough, here's the real kicker. Everyone on the team has to stay together within 50 yards of each other from start to finish. I mean, there's not that many people in our own families you want to spend that kind of quality time with, right? And if one person on your team quits, your entire team is disqualified. So based on the rules of this crazy sport and the fact that we couldn't say that we were a success unless all of our teammates, and in your case, your customers also cross the finish line with you, right? Which sounds very familiar to every tech superstar out there. Now, as you can imagine, the most important thing that we learned out there had very little to do with sports. What we learned is that the secret to success is to play less as an individual and more as a team. As a coach, as a leader, you play not your 11 best, but your best 11. In other words, a lot of the magic really happens for us in terms of our results when we inspire individual superstar team members to also be great teammates. So do any of you guys want to be an adventure racer when you grow up now, after that charming description? No, of course not. You are all way too smart for that. And you have real jobs with paychecks and everything. But guess what? Although none of you will ever enter an adventure race on purpose, boy, sometimes the adventure race enter us, right? Because tell me if this isn't your life right now, especially after last year. You all have, small teams of men and women who are trying to navigate their way through totally uncharted terrain in pursuit of what feels like an impossible goal, working against extreme time pressures in constantly changing and challenging conditions, and with the goal of not just falling across the finish line, but of crossing the finish line among the best of the best in the world. Hi, adventure racers. So how do we, as incredible adventure racers, adapt, overcome, and win as one in the face of times of incredible challenge and change? Well, the first way that we do that is all great winners and leaders are consistently ruled by the hope of success versus the fear of failure. Where you focus your energy and effort, that is whether you're playing to win versus playing to simply not lose, leads you to two completely different finish lines, doesn't it? Next time you're faced with a difficult challenge, think about where your brain goes and hibernates. Are you a person that kind of lives in what are my fears, my concerns, my obstacles, my worries, and you kind of stew around there for a little while? Or are you a person that says, yeah, I got all this craziness going on right now, but I still have to get to my finish line, right? Our employees, our customers are counting on us, my family's counting on me. Maybe I just have to find a more creative, more innovative way to win. Now, I learned this lesson the hard way from my buddy Ian, the first time I raced with the best team in the world. And we're in Ecuador in the World Championships called the Raid Gauloise. And for 6 days, we're at the front of the pack with the best team in the world, Team Intersport, which you'll kind of sense as a theme throughout this entire presentation. In these years, it was our international team against Team Intersport, the top French team. So for 6 days, we can't shake them and they can't shake us. Day 7, we started 3 days downriver to this finish line. And it started with each team in a whitewater raft. So we jumped in ours, they jumped in theirs. And my brain had operated on fear of failure my entire life. So where do you think my focus was? On them, right? Were they gaining on us? Were we going to lose? So as we were going down the river, I would paddle, 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 turn around, paddle, 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 turn around. I did this for hours, like every 5 minutes, seeing if they were gaining on us. And finally, my buddy Ian, who was sitting behind me in the boat steering, he was so annoyed by where my focus was on simply not losing that the next time I turned around to see where our competitors were, he was so mad. He took his paddle and he threw it down in the boat. And he grabbed the top of my head, which was facing backwards, and he physically spun my head back around to face forwards downriver. And he leaned over, and in my ear, he said, "Winning is that way." Which means a heck of a lot more to me now than it did then. But there's a guy on the other side of the boat, my buddy Steve Gurney out of New Zealand. And Steve has one of those amazing MacGyver type brains, like a lot of you. Like Steve could completely build a space shuttle in his living room. He started thinking about the resources that we had in the next transition and what it was really going to take to win. And when we got to that next transition area, the race director took away each team's whitewater raft and handed each of us 2 inflatable canoes. So our competitors grabbed their canoe paddles, jumped in their canoes, and they were gone down the river. And Steve turned to all of us and he said, "Hey guys, hold up, I got an idea. I want to get our climbing rope out of our gearbox, the rope that we use for the mountaineering section, and I want to actually tie our 2 boats together." This had never been done before. He wanted to tie our 2 boats together end to end using our climbing rope through all the D-rings on the outside of both boats so he could make one big long boat. And then he said, "And why are we mentally stuck using canoe paddles just because these are canoes? We're a much stronger kayaking team." But nobody ever thought to use kayak paddles in these canoes before. Now, a lot of you know the difference between the paddles, right? Canoe paddle is a single blade, and then you switch hands and use it on the other side. A kayak paddle is a long stick with blades on both ends, and you swing back and forth with it. They are literally 2 completely different sports. So we were much stronger kayakers. We just got out our kayak paddles and made them longer to fit around the edges of the canoes. And between those 2 things, tying the boats together and switching out the paddles, we ended up creating what we called the Steve Gurney missile. And we put that sucker on the water 40 minutes behind our competitors. And I was completely freaking out. And it was a huge, big risk. But sometimes with big risk comes big reward, right? And believe it or not, they actually caught the Steve Gurney missile in action. I'll let you see what happened.
Charges forward, determined to catch the leaders before the transition to the sea kayaks. Team Solomon Presidio pulls up on the beach at Same. They will soon become the first American team ever to win an international adventure race.
Much too long. Oh yeah, Robyn, you are an awesome woman. You got us to the top of the mountain.
This is a moment they will never forget, but the moment has lasted 9 days.
How awesome is Steve Gurney? Like, he's truly one of the smartest people I've ever met. So Steve, you guys, was kind of like the OG of what we call, industry disruption or continuous improvement or operating in the white space. I mean, every race, Steve would do what we all did, which is look at what was in the rules. But more importantly, Steve would have a lot of deep thoughts about what wasn't in the rules. And I swear he came up with something more creative and brilliant, to win the next race. So the big question is, what is your next Steve Gurney missile gonna be, right? This is what you guys do for a living, right? Creating what's next in technology. Like, creating a Steve Gurney missile is all about taking your core strengths and talents and your background and experience and your creativity and your agility and your amazing resources and your great teammates and saying, you know what? I'm not just going to find a way to tilt the game board in our company's favor or in my customer's favor. Maybe I'm going to find a way to completely change the game or change the way the game is played. In that race, we couldn't shake them for 8 days. In the 9th day of the race, we put 2 hours on them with the Steve Gurney missile. And it was really that moment when somebody said, hey gang, what if we do what it takes to win versus simply not lose? That changed everything. Great leaders also always help their team members focus on the comeback, not the setback. Now, I had a small medical setback about 8 years ago. I discovered I had end-stage osteoarthritis in both my hips. And so over the last 8 years, I've had 6 hip replacements because the first 4 failed. Yeah, I'm the person that they're looking for in those commercials, right? Like if you've had failed hip replacements, call the law offices of that dude and that guy. Yeah, cheers. And you're looking at my butt. And now we're all BFFs, aren't we? But I share these crazy metal hips with you guys because they led me to a couple of really neat things. I was always inspired by the Chuck Yeager quote about how you back up but never give up. So after my first hip replacement, I thought, okay, adventure girl, what are you gonna do now? And the first thing I realized was I probably need a new sport because I really wasn't gonna be a good enough adventure racer anymore. But I always loved the kayaking sections in the races. That's where I felt my happiest and strongest. But I didn't really know whether the guy behind me in the double kayak was providing most of the motor or how much motor I was providing. So I decided to take a whack at being a solo ultra endurance kayaker and to focus on what I could do instead of what I couldn't do. And for my first trick, I set out to break the current Guinness World Record for longest distance paddled by a female in a kayak in 24 hours. And I went up to the Yukon River in Canada and I broke that record, and my record still stands. So I had to be a goober and show you guys my certificate. All right, so after that, I thought, well, maybe I have a new sport here, but I hadn't really raced against other humans yet. So I decided to enter my first big race. And I entered the longest nonstop paddling race in the world, which is called the Missouri River 340. It's a 340-mile nonstop paddle from Kansas City to St. Charles down the Missouri River. And I so should have started with something shorter. But I brought my adventure racer brain to paddling. And whereas most of the competitors in that race kind of assumed you had to sleep every night because that's what they had always done. They'd pull over on the banks and take a nap for a couple hours. I knew I had raced for 2.5 days without sleep before, so I just paddled through the whole thing. And when I got to the finish line, my poor husband, bless his heart, had to physically pick me up out of the boat. And when he picked me up, he said, "Oh my God, I'm so excited you were second." And I said, "I'm second woman in my first big race." Like I couldn't believe it. And he said, "No, you don't understand. You were second overall out of all 111 mostly male-powered solo boats in the race." And you guys, I've actually been second place there overall now as of 2 Julys ago out of 324 solo boats. 5 times. It's the worst. There's always one guy that beats me. And it's always a different guy. Like, I can't even just wait for the one guy to stay home. It's the worst. But I'll tell you what, it really is cool to be up there on the podium, right, with the very best of the best, men or women, in another sport. But the neatest thing that these crazy metal hips led me to was the coolest thing that's ever happened in my life. And that's the inspiration to start the Project Athena Foundation. And what we do at Project Athena is my semi-broken adventure racer friends and I help survivors of medical or traumatic setbacks live an adventurous dream as part of their recovery. Right? We help them create their big comeback party. So every year we take survivors and fundraisers too, by the way, if any of you wants to come with us, on crazy endurance adventures like hiking all the way across the Grand Canyon in one day, or kayaking and riding bikes from Key Largo to Key West over 3 days in November, or hiking 45 miles all the way across Zion National Park in 2 days. You don't have to all rush to the website to sign up. I see that right at the edge of your seats. How do I get started? We'll have coffee, we'll talk. But the neatest thing happened a couple years ago, and we became one of the CNN heroes, which I kind of felt was the universe showing me that I had made a different kind of comeback of my own after my setback. But you know the deal, right? I mean, sometimes something happens in your life or in your career or in the world, and you look back a couple years later and say, you know what? In some ways, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me or happened to us, because we're here in this better place now, and look at all we've learned. I mean, in my case, I would have never discovered paddling or started Project Athena if I had more cartilage in my world. So I am kind of grateful for that all the time. Because at the end of the day, we're never defined by our setbacks, we're defined by our comebacks. Great winners and leaders also always choose progress over perfection. Things are never going to be exactly the way we want them, right? In fact, things are very rarely exactly the way we want them. But we go forward and we create our own luck, and we do the very best we can with what we've got on that day